VCs don't do anything. Find great people, give them money, don't f it up. That's it. There's nothing worse than a credible idiot, and that is where like real damage gets done. VCs love to say the phrase, I know enough to be dangerous, because what they mean that to say is like, I know enough to sound credible without being credible, which is exceptionally dangerous.
Yoni, welcome to Venture Grounds.
Hey man, thanks for having me.
Good to see you. Why don't you give us a little background on yourself,
sure.
and then tell us more about Slow?
For sure. So I'm Yoni. I'm one of 4 partners at Slow Ventures. We're a seed and pre-seed fund. I'm the only partner here in New York. I have 1 in Boston, 2 in the Bay. I sometimes like to joke and say I'm the executive chair of the Slow New York practice. It's just me and the vice chair, but you know, we run a pretty tight ship. We are a generalist seed and pre-seed fund. So we invest in the earliest rounds of businesses. And our general investing philosophy is to try and do the stuff that feels, if not contrarian, at least non-consensus, on the belief that you need things, you need N of 1 inputs to get N of 1 outputs. So we like things that feel off-kilter, out of center, maybe hard to grok for one reason or another. And it's, you know, our belief in our business to try and fund them to the point of, you know, legibility and inevitability.
I love that. That's awesome. Thank you. Right into it. If AI permanently compresses software margins, is the venture model itself mispriced? And what will great software margins look as outdated as newspapers and classifieds in the next 10 years?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think, so there's obviously this new phenomenon now of these like super fast growing AI companies, either sort of vertical AI, often kind of targeted like some specific industry, or kind of prosumer tools. And these things just kind of rip. And there's a characteristic within them that they often have low or sometimes no or sometimes negative gross margins. People talk about these as like, I think it was Bessemer called them like supernovas.
Okay.
And I think some of this is just a result of like venture dollars going in to kind of pump growth. And but obviously like businesses need to make money to be able to stick around. So I don't think that we settle in a world of like 20 to 40% gross margins. I also don't think we end up in a world of, you know, the kind of traditional 80 or 90% gross margins. I think for software, we will see a re-rating down to, you know, call it 40 to 60%. That's already starting to happen in some public names. So like Figma, for example, has had meaningful margin compression since rolling out its AI Figma Make. And they are really investing a lot in that product and eating a lot of the token costs as a result.
Yeah.
I think that even if these margins in like pure play software businesses come down, and for many, they will stay really, really down and businesses will probably just die as a result. To me, it's a moment to look past pure play software companies. So I often think about the opportunity as, yeah, there's certainly still a category and universe of like pure play SaaS-like businesses. Even if they're AI or agents, they still sort of have the rough business models and products that are kind of comparable to SaaS. I am generally more focused on a couple other things. So one, that's businesses that use um, services to differentiate a software. So that's broadly speaking the entire kind of forward deployed model, where if you're doing a level of service implementation customization, you provide something that's both highly differentiated and highly retentive, and that brings pricing power back to you while still doing something obviously really great for your customers. The second is businesses that use software to differentiate a service. So this is broadly speaking like vertically integrated services companies. Inclusive within that is some of the like what we call growth buyouts, what some of the rest of the market refers to as like AI roll-up companies. So if we build a native services offering and we do some kind of services work, say like, you know, consulting project, better, faster, cheaper because of software that we either use, built or bought. Um, Again, that puts us in a position to have like a meaningfully differentiated offering, and again, retain pricing power. And very often, if you're selling a service, you just charge more money for it than if you're selling a tool. And then the third is like network effects oriented businesses. So in many of our like kind of more pure play software companies, we're really encouraging them and we're backing founders who see this way on their own to move towards like a multiplayer model at scale. So there's this whole opportunity of companies that maybe come in with this prosumer or vertical AI playbook out of the gate. They rip, maybe they're a little bit margin constrained. Um, but if they can go from being like these kind of valuable single player tools into like connectivity driven multiplayer businesses.
Like across the organization, they kind of spread.
So certainly maybe within either across an organization. So you can even just think about, what does it look like to go from a tool that, you use to like kind of organize your own day to the tool that your entire company uses for, collaboration. That's definitely one example. There's other things that might be, coordination across companies, or, building something that resembles, has some of the characteristics of like a marketplace business or a network effects driven business. We know that that historically is both highly retentive, margin rich, and defensible. So in any case, we're basically trying to think about businesses that are like software plus or AI plus or whatever plus plus. There's also a whole category of companies that are really leaned in on AI plus hardware. We at Slow are a little bit less focused on that. We have a couple of those bets, but I do think that's like a really good, big, interesting category if you can use things like robotics and sensors to differentiate your AI platform in one way or another. So I think that at the top of your question, you asked about like, do these things kind of re-rate to look like media businesses? And I think that's definitely possible, where you might just see whether the example is like a media business or a services company, things that find sort of a new bottom, not at zero and not at negative, but a new bottom of margins for like pure play software businesses. There will obviously be big breakouts from that are successful for one reason or another, but for the most part, we are looking for more hybrid business models.
I love it. That's great. Thank you. When switching costs collapse, which actually survives? Vertical depth, network effects, or hybrid models? And which ones just buy time before commoditization?
I think that I'm willing to make the bet that all three of those things potentially maintain like switching costs and are therefore retentive. The thing that's really interesting to think about, and I definitely don't know the answer to this yet, or we maybe haven't really seen it yet, is if all of like interaction just starts looking like a text box, then like swapping out tools becomes basically free. You can just like port your data, port your memory from one system to another. Even beyond that, if you wind up working in tools that let you swap out one model for another, um, which we're starting to see some of, like that is potentially a really big challenge to margin for um, some of the like, labs businesses. And then the third is like, if we are using tools through like through some other either chat or like agentic experience. So I'm not actually going and using my CRM. An agent is going and using my CRM on my behalf. Then like, what does it matter if that's in Salesforce or HubSpot? It's totally invisible to me because I have like one app
Yeah.
and I have an agent that goes and I just say, hey, write this into the database for me, and that happens. And where it ultimately gets written into is pretty much invisible to me.
Yeah, I mean, I just was talking to a company yesterday. It was like AI agents implementing new ERPs or taking
Yeah,
someone from like a legacy system into a brand new system. So it's like that should exist. I mean, the consulting
totally.
firms are the ones that would dominate that space, and they would do that. But like that's gonna be a real thing. Like
Yeah.
it's gonna be much easier for people to move some of those very archaic, really hard to do
Yeah.
things.
And we're definitely already starting to see that. So like we have one company at Slow that is a consulting services company. They're a system integrator. They go and help really big, complicated organizations modernize their infrastructure and, move from one provider to another, or, consolidate instances from from one provider into a single instance. And like AI is already very, very good at starting to build some of the everybody loves talking about ontologies, but like, AI is very good at starting to build some of those ontologies, and it doesn't happen in an entirely autonomous way. It requires like supervision and observation and guidance along the way. But hey, like if I said to you, hey, you work in business development, like describe this task that you do within a given day, and like, and if we can start to build like relatively more structured data around that to understand like when you go and log something as an opportunity, and like talk me through literally like every single step that you take and button that you press, and like what does this field mean versus that field, that like dramatically brings down the switching costs, even beyond any sort of like really far out future version of like, I don't actually use the tools, the agent uses the model on
Correct.
behalf.
Yeah, you care much less about that experience. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, like I've just got my own thing that knows me and knows how I
Yeah.
work, and it gets the data where
yeah.
it should be.
So some of this is already there, and I think it will meaningfully bring down switching costs. And what we'll wind up seeing is a world in which within the enterprise, like software can do more things. So like the number of use cases will expand. The cost to build software goes meaningfully down. So we'll see more vendors for each use case, and software gets better faster and depreciates faster, which means that like we'll see the upgrade cycles get faster. So you look at all three of those things, it's like more use cases, more vendors for each use case that are switched out more regularly. That results in like a much more complex enterprise environment to manage, and a like kind of constantly churning ongoing procurement cycle versus like kind of more like monolithic.
Yeah, you win a customer, you got them for years.
Exactly. Yes.
Like you have to protect the shit out of those.
Yes.
As AI floods hiring, sales, and code with volume, where does power really consolidate?
Yeah.
Platforms, integrators, or new filtering layers? And why do people underestimate how concentrated it gets?
So I think one of the principal characteristics of AI is that we move to a world where like content creation broadly defined and action broadly defined becomes abundant, and attention becomes very scarce. That is a really radical departure from the world that we've been living in basically for like all of human history. And we're starting to see this play out already. Like anyone who has done hiring knows that the volume of inbound applications has skyrocketed because it is functionally free to fill out a job. Anyone who has an email address knows that the cost to produce, like at this point, reasonably sophisticated outbound campaigns has basically dropped to zero. Anyone who has managed an engineering team knows that the volume of code that they have to review has gone way up because the cost to produce 1,000,000 lines of code has basically dropped to zero. So like in each of these instances, we're starting to see, or I think we're on the verge of seeing like processes within our culture, society, and economy that really are premised on abundant human attention and scarce production start to meaningfully break down. So like this is I think particularly painful at some of the like the bottom end of the hiring market. And by the way, also for the talent side as well, like I'm sure I literally get probably 5 a day, like spammy inbound texts.
Yeah. Oh God.
If you're actually in a market where like you and I are not hopping jobs all the time,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
but like if you're actually in a market, say like healthcare staffing or something,
Ooh.
that is a market that literally like that's how that market works, is on like
Yes.
texts and phone calls. Like those channels are getting destroyed right now. And so in each of those instances, it becomes like when the sort of abundant scarce dynamic flips, I think you start to see the rise of, either again a lot more like network oriented businesses. Like how do I know who to transact with? How do I know who to trust when I can't necessarily just rely on like public facing signals, because those public facing signals are cheap or free to produce?
Everyone can do it.
Yeah, exactly. Like I can send, it used to be, oh, well, it's a personalized email. Like personalized email means nothing now.
Yep. They've got the great website.
Yeah,
They've got all the customer logos.
exactly. So I think you start to see, it's not one response. I think it's a bunch of different responses from different parts of the world. But like we are very, very interested in how hiring changes. We have incubated and funded a number of companies around that already. We are very interested in how like code collaboration changes. We funded one business that just thinks like Git goes away entirely. He's really enthusiastic about the idea that like Git is premised on one set of assumptions. That set of assumptions is changing. Like the technology is going to stop working. All these things are early bets. Who's to say? But these feel like really, sort of they fulfill the criteria that we look for of like big if true vision grounded in some, like deep conviction and earned insight. Time will tell, but I think directionally this all feels like pretty right and obvious to me. So we're very excited about those kinds of opportunities.
I love it. If trust, taste, and judgment become the real scarcities, who gets shut out? And are we quietly building a more exclusionary economy?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think before cameras started coming on, we were talking about like hiring for new grads.
Yeah.
I would not want to be a new grad right now. The new grad hiring market feels really, really challenged, and it's challenged both because the process of getting a job is harder. Again, if the cost to apply goes down, the cost to get a job goes up, and there's some real meaningful contraction in those opportunities because suddenly, like when we all have an army of
agents,
agents that can like fulfill the job of like of a junior, like we're just not taking the same amount of time.
You're not
and
as
effort.
pressed to get that person in immediately. Yeah.
Like I think the place that we're starting to really see a hollowing out is at the bottom, and that creates real like if you have a system that's based on trust, that is almost necessarily exclusionary, and I don't think that it can like we need to be able to rethink how you get into that circle of trust. And it does sort of feel like at some level kind of a civilizational challenge, because we need to continuously like bring people up. Like if we stop hiring new people, eventually everyone's going to retire.
Yeah.
And like we're going to be shit out of luck.
Yeah. And you're not going to be able to mentor like people who could be incredible.
Yeah. And I think some of this again is already happening. It's like pretty early. There's a lot of confounding variables, but at least directionally, it does seem like it's happening right now. I think part of the logical response to this is to increase transaction costs, and to recognize transaction costs, even if artificial, as a feature, not a bug. So one example of this that's already happened is that the Common App increased their fees to apply to colleges. From when I applied to college, I think sending a Common App, it was like it was a nominal fee. I think it was like $5.
Okay.
And I think now it's like, I think it might be like $50 or $100. So I applied to, I don't know, whatever, I think like 10, 12 schools, something like that. I think people on average are applying to far fewer schools than they did, 10 or 15 years ago when I was applying to college, because of the fees. Like the marginal school that you might have applied to, you're just not going to do. Now that's a very like literal and obvious way to do that. Like we funded a company called Merit First, which is trying to replace like kind of the like cover letter static application flow that we're all familiar with. You've probably applied to 100 jobs that way. I've applied to 100 jobs that way.
Doing that bullshit.
Trying to replace that with more of a like dynamic live AI interviewing process, and more like skill-based assessment. That is a much higher transaction cost. Like it takes an hour. You can't make it go faster. You can't copy and paste answers from ChatGPT in it. It's like posing a question, solve it live. So basically, how do we...
Incredible screening of candidates.
How do we scale skill-based assessments, which has two impacts. One, you filter out low intent applications, which I think is good and positive. And two, you reorient your hiring process around, you know, what is hopefully a more like meritocratic way to screen people rather than just saying, oh, like this guy went to Harvard and this guy went to, you know, a state school, so that's who I'm going to choose. Um, because so much of this happens, so much of this sort of algorithmic filtering, which has all of these kind of adverse second order effects, it really happens at the top of the funnel. So I think if you can increase transaction costs at the top of the funnel, um, it's it is probably healthy and necessary and inevitable to wind up with more like high quality kind of trusted interactions down funnel.
If model progress froze tomorrow, who wins the next decade? Incumbents catching up or insurgents built to deploy?
Yeah.
And what does market shift consistently misread about that?
So I definitely think that model progress could basically stop today and we would have 10, 20, 30 years of like really important work in front of us. Um, you know, I look to the example of the cloud and there are still like, you know, lift and shift cloud deployments happening right now. And they're probably going to still be
Yeah.
happening, you know, years or decades from now. So like the idea that this stuff kind of flips and suddenly like, oh, we're cloud based and is just not true. So I don't think there's any reason to believe that that will be true in AI as well. That like there are organizations, often newer companies, that have, you know, built themselves from the ground up to be AI forward or AI first. And as, you know, new models come out, as new capabilities come out, they'll very likely be the first to adopt them. But like that's a tiny segment of the actual economy. Like most companies are not AI anything.
Building on all the new models.
Yeah, exactly. It like,
It's our bubble.
yes. And so I am generally more interested in the idea of like thinking about like deployment than I am in thinking about like raw model improvement. I think it's again, it's like how do you get these technologies and capabilities into, you know, the real economy, the real world, like normal people, which has I think a much more like transformational, the potential for much more transformational impact than like how do I get a sort of like 10x engineer to be marginally more efficient than they already are today. So it's obviously like the labs have to keep improving what they're doing because of the dynamics of their own business and market and competition with one another. But I think it's actually pretty myopic to sort of focus on and obsess over that versus the companies that are getting the capabilities into the hands of, you know,
Blue collar
normal people.
workers, yeah.
But I mean, blue collar workers, white collar workers, like I think it's really easy to just underrate. Like, I mean, um, like Goldman Sachs isn't meaningfully using AI today in their like investment banking group. Like that is a company that is like we all sort of think of as sophisticated and they have a huge engineering team.
Should have the
and
latest
like
and greatest. Yeah.
they're like not really doing it. So like I hesitate to even think about like what, you know, some like I was gonna say freight company, but actually RXR is doing some cool stuff. But like what like fill in the blank industrial business is doing because they're going to be a decade behind.
Oh yeah.
And then the second piece of it is like thinking about if that's sort of like deployment. The second piece of it is thinking about product and like I don't yet think we've really seen kind of like breakthrough substantially new like product modalities. Basically, what we see everyone do is like crib some version of first thought, best thought, which is to say like I'm going to build a 2-panel screen that has like a text chat interface on one side and then like, you know, some kind of like, you know, display on the other. And like that feels really good for some stuff, but I'm hesitant that like that's what AI first products are going to look like forever, in the same way that like the early versions of TV shows, well, the early versions of movies were basically filmed to look like plays. And if you watch movies from like, you know, like the 20s and 30s, they often were actually filmed on like
Stages.
sets, stages, like theatrical sets. The first TV channels were basically modeled after magazines. The first, websites also basically modeled after magazines. Like early apps were like super skeuomorphic, and over time we sort of found new form factors in each one of those things. Like it's just new kind of media and content forms usually like crib off of some kind of static prior generation and then find something new. Um, I I'm a little bit skeptical that like the best possible way to interact with AI is through a text box. I would also say that like but I might be wrong, because I would also say that the best possible way to interact with like technology broadly is probably not like a super unergonomic like black rectangle, and yet that's like what we feel like pretty fucking stuck in that. So like I would have been excited about ambient computing.
I'm excited
and
for
whatever.
better times.
Yeah, but we just don't. It just didn't really happen yet. Maybe it will. So yeah, I think the idea of like what does product look like beyond chat is a big, interesting, open question that we're starting to see some ideas around, or at the very least, like a more enriched version of chat. Chat has a bunch of limitations to it, and the way both like sort of visually and from a design and product perspective, and also technologically, like our chat-based apps have a bunch of limitations to them. The thing I always find really funny is like ask ChatGPT what day it is or what time it is. Like it doesn't know. And like that is a real limiter for like a ton of different kinds of products and experiences that you would want to build, but suffer from those limitations of like LLM-based chats today.
Wow, yeah. That's incredible. Inside a real company, what breaks first when AI meets reality? Data, org structure, incentives, or trust? And which is the one that's hardest to fix?
I mean, I think we've talked a bit about how, like, I think trust becomes really challenging, especially when you sort of are getting like bombarded in a bunch of different ways. I think some of the data infrastructure, we're starting to see like the idea that you're going to have really good, successful rollouts of AI products that both produce a ton of like data exhaust and rely on your existing infrastructure. Like there's a kind of a missing precursor step there. I think that like data is like a core like primitive or substrate on the same level as like compute and intelligence for AI within the enterprise. Um, and then I think as well, like some of the org structure stuff is maybe breaks isn't the right word, but becomes it will be meaningfully challenged to change. So whether that's because of some of the obsolescence, unfortunate obsolescence of like junior talent in a lot of organizations. Like, how do you respond to that if you want to have really great middle level people in 10 years and senior people in 20 years? Like, you maybe have to make hires that you don't actually need and reorganize your business to look more like an apprenticeship model as an investment for the future, irrespective of your current needs and like their current output today. The idea of apprenticeship is not like new. We have a word for it because it's existed for a long time, but it's just not how most companies are run today. You certainly have like within some big corporations, you will have these like rotational and kind of junior management positions.
Consulting firms have it all the
Totally.
time, right? Like massive organizations.
Yeah. And I think you might see something like that emerge again in the future. Which is like we're going to hire people not because they're going to do anything productive today, but because we need to like situate them within the organization so that in 2 years they can like be fully prepared to contribute at a high level.
Because they're smart and we just need them on the team.
Yeah.
And then we can figure it out later once they understand our business.
Exactly. Like we can't run the risk of not having talent in perpetuity, but we don't need them today. So like what do? You just have to treat it as an investment.
Yeah. Great generalists.
Yeah.
Has pivot culture become a crutch that keeps bad companies alive longer than they should be?
I kind of I've changed my mind about this a few times. I've pivoted, which is that like I think I used to be a little bit more of a hardliner that like big pivots are generally just bad, and that like, hey, when we come into a business, we make an agreement about like what's the thing that you're going to go and try and do, and um, and if you don't do that, if that doesn't work, like it's fine. Just say it didn't work, move on. Don't like pivot endlessly and just sort of flailing around. That's contrary to a commonly held view that like, oh, just figure it out, like keep going, never stop, always pivot. And people will point to things like, hey, Cognition started as a video chatting app, and Slack started as a video game company, and Instagram started as a food something. I don't actually remember what it was. Whiskey, whatever what it
Oh,
was.
wow.
The app was called Whiskey. I don't remember what they actually did. And that is like an extreme that I think creates certain like expectations for people that they like have to keep going, and they'll run themselves and like you have to run yourself into the ground. And I just think it's kind of like cruel and unfair to founders, where very often when people try to pull off a big pivot, they're coming at it with like probably the wrong team, like not enough money because they've already been spending a bunch of money, often like feeling pretty demoralized. Like the odds of
Deflated,
it
yeah.
working are very low, and the costs of it failing actually can be quite high, because like putting 2 years into something that doesn't work is obviously half as bad as putting 4 years into something that doesn't work. So like, I don't think that people should feel pressured to pivot to satisfy the obligation that they made to their investors. Like we all know most of the time we're going to lose money, and like that's fine. What I think I've maybe softened or gotten, I'd like to think a little bit more sophisticated about, is the idea that like you can pivot around an idea, which is to say like you can change your angle of approach towards the same ultimate goal, which is really different than saying like we're going to become a
Completely
different
new
company.
company,
Yeah,
new
exactly.
customers, new product.
Exactly. And I, I think I have a more developed point of view on that now, that like it's actually is good and healthy and organic to like probably execute a lot of pivots as quickly as possible, pointed towards like some direction, very often like some deep belief about the future, and just changing the vector, changing the angle of approach. Um, and that is part of like an organic discovery process, which is different than saying we made a bet, the bet is wrong, now we have to go and figure out a new company within our existing sort of shell. um, I just like, it sucks when really talented people get like burned out on company building because they have a bad experience, and they like feel like they've missed out on really good earning years, and they're exhausted and they're beat up, and like that just sucks. And I think VCs give a lot of bad advice about that, because like it's free to me. Like I don't care. I have a bunch of companies. Like, yeah, go kill yourself working on this, and like if it works out, awesome for me. If it doesn't work out, well, I've already written it off anyway, so it doesn't matter.
What about early on in the journey? Right? Like, so
Yeah.
company starts, pivots in a month in, 2 months
Yeah,
in,
I think that's more along the lines
you'll accept colossal shifts.
of like very often that's more along the lines of like change our vector of our angle of approach on like on some consistent worldview or like outcome that we see. If someone a month into a company is like, hey, you gave me a few $1,000,000 for this thing, within a month I have invalidated it, and now I've entirely invalidated it, and I now want to like go do this other thing completely. Honestly, that is a failure of process on both of our parts, because I'm like, if you were able to so completely invalidate this in like a month, 2 months, 3 months, either like we should not have given you money because you should have been able to invalidate this already, or like you are writing off this opportunity way too quickly, and like should try some smaller, more incremental pivot along the way. um that to me, yeah, I think that speaks more to like an upstream problem. I think it's very healthy and normal and organic to say like, this is the company I want to be running in 10 years. I'm going to try a ton of different things in the first year or two to like figure out what puts me on the path to getting there.
Yeah, cool. What's the clearest signal a founder is making a healthy type 1 pivot versus avoiding the truth with a type 2 pivot?
I probably wrote something about that, but I don't remember what I said. Yeah, yeah, we can skip that one. It's a great question.
It's great.
I don't.
We loved it.
Huh. You know, when you write like 800 words a week, they don't all stick in here. You know, like.
Okay. You've said pivots fail when founders ask for permission, but work when they declare a decision. When should founders ignore investors?
Yeah.
And when does conviction cross into delusion?
Yeah. Okay. So this is non-scientific, but anecdotally, I have seen that when a founder comes to me and says, "I'm doing this," versus when a founder comes to me and says either "Can I do this?" or "Should I do this?" In the former case, they have a much higher rate of success. You know, or at least success being like, it's early on. I don't want to, you know, they have a much higher rate of like some early indication of success. And I was thinking about why that might be. I think there's a few reasons. So probably the biggest one being that if a founder is coming to me and saying like, this is a decision I've made, you know, big or small, I'm informing you of it, it probably means it's pretty high confidence, you know, or it almost necessarily means it's high confidence because they feel confident enough to just make it versus someone who comes to me and asks, you know, there's a fine line between like asking for insight and asking for permission. And I think if someone comes to me and asks for permission to do something, that means that it's a lower confidence decision on their part for any reason. And if we believe, which I do, that like we're going to back really exceptional people and trust their judgment and trust their like I would rather make the mistake of trusting their judgment too much than not enough. So we're going to back really exceptional people and just trust their judgment, you know, pretty much completely. Then like it makes sense that when they are going to do some big thing and they know it to be true, they believe it very deeply to be true, that like it's much more likely to be the right thing. If you're asking me for permission to make some big decision, like
not a good sign.
It probably means that you know it's not the right sign.
Damn.
You know, it's not the right thing.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm an idiot, really, is what I want. You know, like.
All right, now some espresso questions. What's one view you hold about the market that most investors would disagree with?
Oh man, I don't know.
Just one.
Yeah, I don't believe in the concept of stages. I think there's only two stages. I think there's like early and there's late, and that's it.
Yep, I love it. What's one conviction you've completely rethought in the past year?
I think in the past, I believed that the process of, so before I said there's early and there's late, the better language for that is there's like legible and illegible. And in the past, I believed that the process of crossing that chasm was like more about internally generated legibility, that like, if I build it, they will come. If I'm good enough, they will notice. And I no longer think that that's true.
Yep.
I think that you have to actually make people notice. You have to convince them. The data and the reality will not convince them on their own.
Mm-hmm. What's the risk most of ventures sleepwalking past right now?
I mean, probably something about the macro, like the actual real macro economy, which is that like, you know, if you take AI data center buildup out of the GDP numbers, we are like either in a recession or like very close to it.
Yeah.
And so we like run a very real risk of, you know, as we see more of these kind of like complex round trip financial structures, like there's a very real possibility that like any kind of, you know, Nvidia misses earnings and like we go into a recession the next day. And I don't know that that is like factored into most or any people's private market investment plans.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think about. Who's a company, founder, or sector you're fascinated by at the moment, and why?
From my portfolio or
Whatever
from
you
the
want.
broader world? Cool. Who's a company sector? I mean, look, probably the number one thing that I'm really chasing down in 2026 is this question of like the second order effects of AI. So it's not how do we like max tokens, it's what happens after we do. I think that's been suffused through this whole conversation that we've had, is like, what are all of the things that get fucked up and have to get rebuilt, is probably the single most exciting and animating question to me as an investor right now.
Is there anybody, any company that you like, that you know of that's doing that, or?
When is this episode going to come out?
Whenever you want.
Probably
Oh, great. Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
I have
Secret
two.
safe with us.
Yeah, I have two companies announcing rounds like next week. So
Oh,
it's like,
cool.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most exciting companies in that vein is this business, Atomic. So Lee, who's the founder of Atomic, he's been a core contributor to Git for like a decade. He worked at both GitLab and GitHub, and like has a very, very clear point of view on what happens to code collaboration and after and like version control as AI proliferates and like basically his view is code gen fucks up Git, and we're going to see velocity go way down, even as like the lines of code generated go way up. That's like, to me, that is like one of the most sort of big, if true, ideas that I have managed to back in the last year.
Yeah, I mean, I met him too. He's awesome and a super impressive guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a character.
Very much.
Oh yeah, I forgot he banks with you guys.
He does.
Plug.
We love him.
Plug for Row. Atomic, which we led the pre-seed of, and we're really, really excited about, and you should all go and work at, banks with Row.
That's right. What's a founder red flag that actually is a green flag for you?
I don't really care what other people think. I'll just tell you something that I believe, which is that like, people talk all the time about chips on shoulders and like something to prove.
Correct.
And I think that most people miscategorize that most of the time and instead wind up selecting for insecurity rather than like say like a real like chip on the shoulder. I think insecurity is very often like the enemy of improvement and learning and like reinforcement along the way, because it requires like mollycoddling as opposed to like the idea of what is it, DDGR, deep desire to get rich, and PDR or PRD,
like more personal benefit versus like they actually don't want to build an incredible.
Well, there's a poor, desperate, and something. I don't remember what the
PSD degrees.
PSD, yeah.
Love them. Poor, smart, and deep desire to get rich.
Yeah,
Bear Stearns.
Yes.
We love that.
I think it's really important to be able to assess like what people's motivations are, and there's a whole lot of like good motivations, but I get concerned when people can't answer it for me, because that just means that they don't know for themselves, and that means that like maybe they aren't really motivated. Maybe they don't have the right reasons, or maybe they just lack self-knowledge. And I think self-knowledge is very often upstream of like improvement. And if we're gonna bet on people, very often people who we think have the potential to be exceptional, like, rarely are we catching people at their most exceptional. Like, we're not in the position to like be the seed investor for Elon Musk's next company. Yeah. I'd love to be, but we're not. So we need to back people who we think have the potential to be exceptional. Very often it looks obvious in retrospect. So like what we need to find is people who are very good and will maintain a really exceptional like slope of improvement. I believe very deeply that self-knowledge is like a critical input to getting better at anything. You can't honestly assess yourself.
Yeah, know what you suck at.
Yeah.
Be honest with yourself.
So I put a lot of, when I sort of like am interviewing founders, I put a lot of time and effort into just, it almost doesn't matter what the answers are. What matters is their ability to generate an answer.
Yeah. No, I think that's incredible. What does founders consistently get wrong about what VCs actually do?
Yeah, VCs don't do anything. We give you money. It's so simple. It's the simplest business in the entire world. Find great people, give them money, don't fuck it up. That's it. The idea that we are going to like fix some problem for you or enable you, or like, no, I don't know anything. I can't do anything. What I always tell founders, it is like, I want to try and coach on decision making, never on decisions. So that's like, what does it look like for you to make a good decision? How do we know if it's a good decision? Why are you making that decision? How do you improve your own decision-making process? That is so different than either here's what you should do or here's what I can do. Yeah. Here's what you should do might be the worst of all. VCs love to say the phrase, I know enough to be dangerous, which is this like ridiculous self-effacing bullshit statement, because what they mean that to say is like, I know a little bit. What it actually means is I know enough to sound credible without being credible, which is exceptionally dangerous.
Yes.
There is nothing worse than a credible idiot. And that is where like real damage gets done. So as an idiot, I would just like to exempt myself from any kind of decision-making process in a company because I have no idea. I don't have the context. I'm not day-to-day in your company, and I don't have the control. I have no executive authority over the business. So the idea that I'm going to do things or know things makes no sense to me. My job is to give you money
and help you and
my job is to give you money. If I coach you along the way, that's bonus.
Yeah.
Like, we want to be good thought partners. We do not want to be partners in action.
Yeah. I love it. Incredible. This is great. Thanks for coming on, man.
It was a lot of fun.
To see you.
Yeah, I'm happy we were able to.
I can't wait to see this. that last question was that's gonna go wide.